So the last team I'm going to be covering of these six teams, and unfortunately, the worst team out of these six teams is the Washington Wizards. And I know a lot of people, honestly, I feel like have kind of just tried to put Washington in like a spot where it's like, oh, they're trash. I don't want to pay attention to them. They're one of the worst teams ever. And honestly, I don't really have that same type of perspective on this Washington team. And I feel like a big part of it is I feel like they're doing exactly what you should be doing in their position. Like, what were people expecting from them? Like, they're not supposed to be a play-in competition or a playoff competition type of team. Like, people knew going into the season that they were going to be a bad team, and I know early on they looked even worse than some people were expecting, but I think they've turned things around a little bit, and I think they have enough promising things going right in their organization that you have a lot of reasons to watch their team. Right now, they're starting Chris Middleton, Koulibaly, Sarr, Trey Johnson, and CJ McCollum. You know, two to three or three of those players I think have a lot of promise. And Washington, like a lot of these younger teams, don't really have like super consistent um play from everybody to build the type of wins that you need. Now, they do have two kind of like veteran players that are just kind of holding the squad down with CJ McCollum and Chris Middleton, but they're two players that aren't really part of this like Washington Wizards future in the long run. Like, it's good to have like a vet on one of these younger teams because they can kind of give a little bit of advice, help them into developing into some good areas. They're doing a good thing that Boston or that Brooklyn isn't doing, where Brooklyn is only young guys, and it's kind of hard to see how they're going to develop. Um, so I think they're doing it right by having a mostly young squad with like one or two vets with Chris Middleton and Stephen J. McCollum. But yeah, the most interesting players on their team is definitely the rookies, the sophomores, the third years on their team. Like, you got Bilal Coulibaly, who, even though he's been a little shaky, he still looks pretty promising. Trey Johnson, Trey Johnson has kind of had to play backup to CJ McCollum. Like, even if they're playing in the starting lineup, they're kind of competing with touches because they have a similar mold, undersized guard who's really there to score, not a whole lot of facilitating. So he's kind of had to take a little bit of a backseat role. But I think this season will be really good for him because he'll have a guy right next to him that can kind of help him into figuring out how do you adapt to NBA defenses at your height, knowing that you're really there just to score. Like, he's not a big facilitator. Like, he's really there to be a scorer for this team. And and yeah, I think he's gonna be really promising. I don't know if he's gonna develop into one of these really dominant scorers. I don't know if he's gonna be a 15 to 20 point scorer throughout his career, but he's showing promise right there. Good three. Um, and yeah, I'm just super interested to see how is he going to develop throughout the rest of the season, as I think he gets to learn some more things being under the wing of someone like CJ who kind of fits that similar mold. And then another player, their number two overall pick, Alex Sarr, he's shown a lot of promise as being a defender and having that footwork to be a really good paint player. Last season, it was a little shaky, like with him and Risa Shea, that one and two overall pick. It was kind of like, ooh, did Washington make the wrong choice here? Because I don't really know if he's like a number two overall pick type quality player. So there was a little bit of that like unease about him, but I think this season he's shown the growth to kind of calm some of that nervousness right there. So it's really good to see that he's being a lot more dominant defensively, and he looks more comfortably on the offensive end. He still, I think, needs to figure out a little bit of his handle a little bit more, and just having a little bit better hands because sometimes he can mishandle the ball when it's passed to him in the paint a little bit. But I think he's shown a lot of promising signs that it was a right pick being being at number two. So that's something that's going to be really good for them. And then a big player that I really like for their squad is Keyshawn George. Now, Keyshawn George, he is not, I really don't expect him to be a 20 to 25 point per game scorer in his career. I just don't expect that from him. But I think one reason that I like Keyshawn George so much for this for this team is because he just seems to have he seems to have like the calmness on the ball and the experience with organizing an NBA offense. That's really really hard to have. Like he looks like he's like a 3 year, 4 year player when he's just handling the ball. And I know that's not something that's huge for a team like Washington because that's not going to be the separator and you being a awful team and you being a play-in or championship squad. But I think it's a really good sign that you got a guy so early into his career and so early into this team looking comfortable enough to be the point guard and the general for your team. Like I could see Keyshawn George being the guy for this team for years and years to come, and just having that security of knowing that you got a ball handler who's comfortable enough to do everything he needs to do on the floor and get it where he needs to get to for whoever needs it, and not have to worry about saying, do we gotta trade da 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 for some ball handler from another squad, and now we gotta trade people who we wanted to keep, or now we gotta trade draft picks and all that. They don't have to worry about that. They got their guy who can ball handle, and it's not gonna be a guy who they need to get rid of. So that's super promising. Um, Bub Carrington too. Like I liked how Bub Carrington has played. I think he's a really really solid role player. I don't know if he's gonna be more than that for this team, but I like how he's been. And even though this roster again isn't that deep of a roster because it's made up of mostly first, second, and third year guys. I just think having like 3 or 4 guys who look like they can be starters for this squad and starters in this NBA for a really long time is super promising because the expectations for a team like this can be extremely low. Like it can be really really low, and I think they're above even normal expectations for a squad like this. So knowing that this is a really different situation than a lot of these other teams, obviously different than in New York, obviously different than in Atlanta, trying to figure out what the goals are for the season, I think don't come down to seeding as much. Like, I don't think it's super realistic for this team to be a play-in team because I think Atlanta right now is a play-in team, and Atlanta is really good for being a play-in team. So I don't think this team would crack into being a play-in team, but I think there are individual goals and player goals that I think are going to be super important to watch for the Wizards throughout this. I think it's going to be important to see, if they keep with CJ McCollum and Chris Middleton throughout the rest of the season, how do their mentorship skills end up translating for this younger Washington squad, because there's a lot of value you can get from being or from having an older player mentoring younger guys and getting them prepped for some of the responsibilities that these guys have right now. Like it's a little bit easier, I think, for some of these Washington players to be comfortable in some of these situations because you got a guy like CJ McCollum who's got tons of experience. You got a guy like Chris Middleton, tons of experience, and we already seen the value of having an experienced guard, having people he can mentor to. So, like a situation like Chris Paul being a mentor to SGA over in OKC, where I think he helped him speed up his development. Obviously, Chris Paul isn't the reason that SGA turned into SGA, but I think just having Chris Paul being one of the all-time guards, being able to just give out certain hints, give out certain like details and tricks and skills and all these things um, during their practices, during the game, during whatever time, just having that resource I think was super helpful in his development. And even though yes, CJ McCollum, he's not Chris Paul. Like that's not that's not a conversation. He's not Chris Paul, but he can still give a lot of you know a lot of skills and a lot of experience and a lot of just kind of like direction to some of these younger guys like a Keyshawn George, like a Trey Johnson, who are going to be handling the ball a ton. And even though Trey Johnson, he's not really a point guard, he's more of a two guard. CJ McCollum is a good combination of both, where he's handled the ball a ton and he also is a scorer. So I think he's a good in between where he can, give some tips and tricks or give some tricks and like advice and knowledge to Keyshawn George on ball handling and organizing an offense, because he had kind of a big role doing that in New Orleans when he was there. He did a lot of ball handling in Portland, even with Dame being there. and he can just give some good advice to Keyshawn George, whose main responsibility is being the ball handler, not really the scoring guy. He can score, but he's just not. That's not really him as much. He's their ball handler. And then on the other side, he can give a ton of advice to Trey Johnson, who Trey Johnson's role is to develop into their scoring guard. At Texas, he was a scorer, and I don't think that's going to change too much for him because, you know, he doesn't really have, I think, the tools to be like more of that defensive minded guard that you'd see with some other people like Drew Holiday, who end up developing into like a 3-and-D guy. Like that doesn't really seem like Trey Johnson's direct trajectory. He seems more on that two guard who can score really, really well as a slasher, um, and as a shifty guard. So I think CJ, he's another really good guy who can help mentor him. And then unfortunately, Whitmore, he's a really, really good um, piece to this team, but he's dealing with some injury issues and some medical issues. So that's gonna be something that you can't really pay attention to too much this season. But yeah, it's great that CJ McCollum is there to mentor um, Keyshawn George and Trey Johnson because they're getting lots and lots of minutes in PT playing with them too. And I think that's a big part of um, how this team is going to develop is the guys who need to develop also are getting lots of minutes because surprisingly that's kind of hard to find. Like there are a lot of teams where they run so many players deep at certain positions that the younger guys who need more development don't get the minutes early enough into their career, and sometimes it can stunt them. Like there have been a lot of situations. Like a good example of this is Nickeil Alexander Walker was on New Orleans, and he didn't look like a good player on New Orleans. He just looked eh. He just looked eh. He didn't look that good. He didn't look that good on New Orleans. But when Minnesota traded for him and gave him an opportunity to get real PT, look how valuable he was. And especially last season, he really, really improved as a player. And then look at what happened this season when he went to Atlanta and got an even bigger role in Atlanta, and he's blossomed to a bigger position. So it's really good to see that with this Wizards team, even though there are a lot of inexperienced players, this team isn't good. The players who need development are getting the minutes that they need, and they're getting the minutes that they need next to guys who can help them out. And that's going to be huge for them because you've also seen a little bit of the other side of this of where you got a team like New Orleans right now where they've got a few guards who I feel like are kind of in a tricky situation coming up pretty soon where you got Jeremiah Fears um, and you got Jordan Poole, and I think you got one other guy. You got Jeremiah Fears, Jordan Poole, and I might be missing somebody, but DeJounte Murray is coming back soon, and I'm a little worried that someone like Jeremiah Fears, who he's played really, really good for them and has gotten a lot of PT, he might kind of dip in his role in his play just because he's not getting the same minutes because DeJounte is a consistent guy for the NBA. He's a consistent 20-point per game scorer. And Washington, they don't have to worry about that because the guys who are getting minutes, like CJ, like Chris Middleton, they're not really stealing minutes from those younger guys. And they've already figured it out to where they can get enough minutes for a Trey Johnson, for a Keyshawn Johnson, or not Keyshawn Johnson, yeah. No, Keyshawn George, not Keyshawn Johnson. Keyshawn George. And they're getting those minutes for someone like Bilal Coulibaly, for Bob Carrington. A little bit more of an issue getting them minutes, but it's a little different there. And Alex are obviously playing a ton of minutes, so it's really, really promising for this Washington team because you actually get to see guys who need to develop get the minutes that they need, and that's one of the most important things for a young team. So it's going to be important to pay attention to how this team develops. And early into the season, they weren't competing with any teams. They looked like they were um, getting whooped every single game. But now they're a lot more competitive against some of these middle level to decent teams in the NBA. And right there, they just got a big stop and a big shot to be down only one, and then CJ makes the shot. So now Washington, 1 second left to go, looks like they're going to get the win to go on to the season, to go on to the next game. And yeah, that's a really big win for them. That's a really, really big win. coming off of a game where I think a lot of people expected Milwaukee to beat them. But that's the benefit too of having this dynamic. But Washington, great team to look forward to, and that's going to be my last team to pay attention to.